Human skin. In the year 2050, a world once defined by progress and technology had spiraled into a darkness no one could have predicted. Humanity's insatiable thirst for the novelty and luxury had led to a sinister industry, one that traded in the most unthinkable currency, human skin. A once taboo concept had become a lucrative market, where the flesh of the living was harvested, sold, and flaunted as the ultimate status symbol. Sarah had always been an observer of society's oddities, a woman who saw the world through a lens of skepticism. But even she couldn't have fathomed the extent to which the world had changed. It was a chance encounter with an old friend that pulled her into the depths of this chilling realization. As Sarah sat across from her friend Emily at a dimly lit cafe, something seemed off. Emily's flawless skin gleamed under the artificial lights, the hue almost too perfect to be natural. Sarah's curiosity got the best of her, and she couldn't help but comment on the otherworldly quality of Emily's complexion. Emily smirked, a glint of something unsettling in her eyes. "You like it? It's the latest trend," she said, her tone casual, but her words sending shivers down Sarah's spine. "The latest trend," Sarah repeated, a growing sense of unease gnawing at her. "Human skin," Emily stated matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest as the implications of Emily's words hit her like a freight train. She'd heard rumors of this dark trade, but to see it so brazenly embraced was a jarring wake-up call. It wasn't just a trend, it was a horror that had seeped into the very fabric of society. "What do you mean, human skin?" Sarah managed to stammer, her voice shaky. Emily leaned in, her smile chillingly serene. "It's the new luxury, Sarah. People want to wear the best, the most exclusive. And what's more exclusive than human skin? It's expensive, of course, but worth every penny. Makes you feel connected." Sarah's stomach churned, her mind reeling as she grappled with the sickening reality before her. Her friend, once a beacon of normalcy, was now a participant in this horrifying trade. The world she thought she knew had shattered into a nightmare beyond her wildest imagination. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't shake the haunting image of Emily's gleaming skin. Everywhere she looked, she saw hints of this twisted trend, people with unnaturally perfect complexions that set her on edge. The more she delved into the dark underbelly of the skin trade, the more she realized the extent to which it had infiltrated society. Driven by a mix of curiosity and dread, Sarah began to investigate further. She followed leads that led her down a rabbit hole of secrecy and deceit. She discovered underground markets where human skin was bought and sold like a macabre commodity, where people went to great lengths to acquire the ultimate accessory. As Sarah dug deeper, she unearthed stories of desperation and cruelty. People were kidnapped, their skin harvested against their will. The allure of wealth and status had blinded society to the heinous crimes being committed in its pursuit. Sarah's stomach turned with each revelation, her nightmares plagued by the faces of those whose lives had been stolen. Haunted by the horror she had stumbled upon, Sarah faced a moral dilemma. She couldn't unsee the truth, couldn't unknow the depths of the darkness that had taken hold. She knew she had to do something, but she was just one person against a vast and corrupt system. Her determination, however, burned brighter than her fear. Sarah began to gather evidence, documents, and accounts that exposed the truth behind the skin trade. She knew the risks were immense, that those in power would stop at nothing to protect their wealth and reputation. But she couldn't stand by and watch as humanity devolved into a monstrous greed. With the evidence in hand, Sarah reached out to those she trusted, forming a small alliance of like-minded individuals who were equally horrified by the state of the world. They devised a plan to expose the truth to the masses, to reveal the darkness that had been festering in the shadows. The risk was great, and the odds were stacked against them. But Sarah was fueled by a sense of justice, a need to make things right in a world gone awry. As the clock ticked, their efforts intensified, each step bringing them closer to the precipice of change. In a world where human skin had become a symbol of wealth and power, Sarah and her allies were determined to expose the gruesome reality that lay beneath the surface. Their battle was against more than just an industry. It was a fight against the erosion of humanity itself. And as the truth began to unravel, the question remained, would society wake up from its nightmare? or would it continue to feed the darkness that threatened to consume it whole? But as Sarah and her allies drew closer to revealing the truth, a chilling realization dawned upon them. The web of corruption ran deeper than they could have imagined. The powerful figures behind the trade were not ones to be trifled with. Their efforts to bring the truth to light had not gone unnoticed, and the darkness they sought to expose fought back with a vengeance. One fateful night, as Sarah gathered with her allies to finalize their plan, the door to their hideout burst open. Masked figures, armed and ruthless, stormed into the room. Panic and chaos ensued as Sarah and her friends fought to defend themselves, their determination to expose the truth unwavering. But the odds were insurmountable, and amidst the chaos, Sarah found herself overpowered and outnumbered. She felt a sharp pain pierce her side, and her strength waned as she collapsed to the ground. As her vision blurred, she saw one of the masked figures approach her, their gloved hands reaching for her skin. "Your curiosity led you down a dangerous path, Sarah," the figure hissed, their voice devoid of mercy. "We can't have you ruining our plans." Sarah's screams echoed through the room as her skin was mercilessly peeled away from her body. The pain was excruciating, beyond anything she could have imagined. Her world spun in a maelstrom of agony, her desperate cries drowned out by the sickening sound of her own flesh being torn. In her final moments, as darkness closed in, Sarah realized the horrifying truth. She had become a victim of the very horror she had fought against. The trade in human skin had claimed her, silenced her, and transformed her into another commodity for the insatiable greed of those who profited from the darkness. As the world continued to descend into the depths of this nightmare, Sarah's sacrifice became a tragic reminder of the consequences of unchecked avarice. And in the midst of a society consumed by its own vanity, her voice was forever silenced, lost amidst the echoes of a world that had lost its humanity. The human farm. The taste of fear lingered in the air, as if every atom in the room was saturated with dread. John's eyes snapped open, the cold dampness of his surroundings seeping into his skin. Confusion jolted his mind awake, and his breaths quickened, coming in shallow gasps. His surroundings were dimly lit, revealing rusted chains hanging from the ceiling, and the gut-churning sight of butchered tools strewn across a blood-splattered table nearby. A tortured moan echoed through the room, raising the hair on John's arms. He struggled against his restraints, the cold metal biting into his wrists. Panic surged within him as he realized he was not alone. All around him, shapes huddled in the corners, their eyes glazed with terror. The stench of filth and decay hung heavily, mingling with the faint scent of something he couldn't quite place. A low creaking sound drew his attention to the door, which had swung open to reveal a group of figures, their faces obscured by layers of grime and darkness. The air grew heavier as the realization struck him. They were not alone. These were not ordinary captors. They were cannibals, and this was their hellish farm. John's heart pounded in his chest, threatening to break free. He watched, paralyzed, as the cannibals moved among the captives. Their fingers trailed over arms, shoulders, and faces, like a macabre selection process. Each touch was a promise of unimaginable horror, and as they whispered to one another in hushed tones, the captives' eyes grew wider with fear. The captives' eyes pleaded for release, for salvation from this living nightmare. John's own thoughts raced, his mind a whirlwind of desperation. How had he ended up here? What had led him to this hellish place? As the cannibals circled closer, John felt a searing determination ignite within him. He had to escape. He had to find a way out of this wretched place before he became another victim, another life harvested for their gruesome feast. His hands fumbled with the chains, his fingers slick with sweat, but he couldn't break free. Time blurred as the cannibals continued their methodical selection, each choice a macabre dance of anticipation. John's breath hitched as one of the captives was dragged away, their screams echoing in the chamber. The reality of their fate was undeniable, and his terror deepened. He closed his eyes in a feeble attempt to shut out the horror, but their haunting cries echoed even in the darkness behind his eyelids. Day turned to night and then to day again, each passing moment a reminder of the inescapable nightmare he was trapped within. Hunger gnawed at John's insides, but it was nothing compared to the hunger for survival that consumed his thoughts. He couldn't bear to be the next, to feel those cold hands grasp him and lead him towards his doom. As the second day drew to a close, the man's senses were heightened, his every nerve on edge. He had watched as the last of the captives was dragged away, their vacant spaces a grim reminder of the life that had been extinguished, leaving only him amidst the suffocating darkness. The cannibals' grins had shifted towards him, their eyes fixated like vultures closing in for the kill. John's body trembled, his mind racing for a glimmer of hope amidst the despair. Just as he prepared himself for the worst, a sudden commotion outside the room caught everyone's attention. The sound of heavy footsteps and raised voices sliced through the air like a lifeline. A wave of relief washed over him as the door burst open, flooding the room with blinding light. "Police, drop your weapons and surrender!" a voice boomed, authoritative and commanding. John's heart leaped with joy as armed officers stormed the room, but as if in a trance, everyone stared at John, including the police. Suddenly, as if a switch had been flipped, the atmosphere shifted. A sinister grin played at the corners of the officers' mouths, and their eyes gleamed with an unsettling hunger. John's elation turned to confusion, and a seed of doubt took root in the pit of his stomach. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. In a sudden and horrifying realization, John understood that he had not been saved at all. The police officers were not here to rescue him. They were part of the same nightmare. It was all part of a sick and twisted joke the cannibals reveled in, giving hope only to take it away. "No, you can't be," John whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He had gone from the clutches of one horror to another, trapped in a cycle of unimaginable torment. The cannibals' twisted game had ensnared him even further, and he was powerless to escape. As the truth unfolded before him, the officers' facade crumbled completely. They advanced with a sinister glee, their weapons trained on John, who was now paralyzed with fear. John's mind raced, searching for an escape, a way to defy the inevitable. But the odds were insurmountable, and the realization of his impending doom settled over him like a suffocating shroud. His heart raced, and his breaths came in ragged gasps as the officers closed in. John's voice cracked as he screamed for help, his cries echoing off the cold, damp walls. But his pleas fell on deaf ears, lost amidst the growing cacophony of terror that surrounded him. In the midst of his frenzied screams, the cannibals began to place their orders with the officers. The once uniformed figures now bore the markings of their true intentions, their humanity stripped away to reveal the monsters beneath. John's mind reeled as their voices filled the room, each order a chilling confirmation of the horrors that awaited him. As their macabre negotiations continued, John's voice grew hoarse, his screams becoming nothing more than desperate whispers. His body trembled, his strength drained by the weight of his terror. He was a lamb led to slaughter, surrounded by monsters who reveled in his fear. The orders had been placed, the fate of the captives sealed. John's eyes widened in a final moment of realization. There was no escape, there was no salvation. His voice joined the chorus of screams that echoed through the room as the cannibals closed in, their hungry eyes fixed on him. And in that final, harrowing moment, John's nightmare reached its chilling conclusion.